Hello everyone, and welcome to our Keep It Science Season 1 Roundup episode, Keep It in a Nutshell. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Kugler, a corporate science communicator, and I'm here with my Keep It Science co-host and a guest turned co-host.
Yes, I'm here for the final time as well this season, fellow SciCommer Dr. Nick Gaunt. Pleased to be here with you, Elizabeth, and I've brought along twice featured nutritionist and now a world-renowned health blogger, Tim Gaunt, my dad.
Hello, that's right. Loved being part of the podcast first time round and keep it stress-free. And then getting to host Keep It Allergy-Free was a real treat.
Yeah, and you've been on other podcasts as well since, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes, I was invited, one of my connections invited me onto his podcast. So that was really exciting to go on someone else's and enjoy a slightly different approach.
Yeah, so this episode's going to be a little reintroduction to us, if this is the first time you're hearing from us. Firstly, where have you been? The season is over. Secondly, we wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves, what we've learned throughout season 1, and maybe inspire some of you to go back and listen to some of the fantastic episodes we've had over the last 7, 8, 9 months now. So a quick introduction to myself and Tim. We're directors of Acorn Scientific Marketing, a science-based marketing firm, and we're sort of quite complementary in our experience, aren't we?
Yeah, obviously the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. Our experiences and expertise don't overlap too much, but they're both scientific bases. So I'm a biochemist and nutritionist, and obviously I know your areas of interest are more chemistry and biophysics, etc. So I spent many years in the natural health industries, whereas obviously,
yeah. So I think where we overlap is the chemistry side of it, but you went much down a different route with chemistry, and mine's more strict life sciences, and then there's some nanotechnology and pharma. So we cover quite a few bases together.
And we've always had a shared interest in scientific discoveries and the sciences in general. So it's good to chat about these things, and we're always on the phone most days, aren't we, chatting about latest discoveries, etc.
Yeah. And I think that's Elizabeth and we sort of connected on that complementary experiences too, and that's been one of the things that's helped us start this podcast.
Absolutely, and I love just listening to the both of you, because obviously you have complementary kind of sciences, but your interests are the same, kind of talking about science, listening about science, and ultimately sharing science, what we do here in the podcast, but obviously also in the blog, which is obviously great now on LinkedIn. As Nick said, we're going to link to the blogs, which are all full of really interesting insights, and often also referred to the podcasts that we do, like most recently about hay fever, and we will talk about that in a second. But before we talk about the actual episodes, we also wanted to introduce again also my company, which is called Zeeks, which is a corporate science communication company. And we work mainly with life science and biotech companies to communicate their work. So we do a lot of writing, illustration, and podcast as a service. And obviously, there's some overlaps with Acorn, but there's also some dissimilarities. And what is really great is that by working together, so bringing Acorn and Zeeks together, we have formed Keep It Science as a podcast collaboration. And it has been really successful, to the point that actually between the three of us, we have won 3 awards, namely the UK Startup Awards, which is really exciting. So they were announced about 2 weeks ago, and Nick and Tim's company have won the Marketing, Advertising and the PR Startup Award of the Year. And my company has won the Creative Startup Award, which is really great. And we actually head to the UK finals in September. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to going down to Tring in Hertfordshire for Ideas Fest for the grand final. And it's described as like the Glastonbury of festivals. So it's going to be a really cool experience, I think. So now this episode is going to be a bit of a summary of what we've learned throughout season 1. I think it would be good to get our collective thoughts and some of our favorite bits from the episodes that we've published so far.
It's been really exciting. And to be honest, I was against podcasts before, and I met Nick, and then he convinced me to do podcasts. And then it has been the most exciting conversations that I had over the last year. So thank you, first of all, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, Nick and Tim, obviously. And also huge thanks to all the guests who made time and came, and all the sponsors and collaborators that worked with us. So we had a really great time, and I've learned so much. And the great thing is also that the season 1 has turned out like a toolkit for the modern scientists, if we can say that. It has been really a showcase of different skills, and we talked a lot about, various different skills, where we had 13 guests over 9 episodes. And we talked really from, for example, keep your science career fun and creative to more technology-focused innovations. And we kind of ended off really with pushing the boundaries and talking about open science, microscopy, and accessibility. We will talk about each episode now a little bit more in detail. But I think what is great is that we can summarize this season 1 really as this toolkit for the modern scientists, and have really spoken about loads of different skills that are essential for all the scientists to have in their arsenal, independent of whether they're in academia or industry, or have started a completely different career path at all. And I think it's a lot about like personal development, mindset, and like team leader strategies that we talked about as well. And I think for me personally, as someone who started my own company in 2022, I didn't initially expect all of this to be so impactful. But I've learned so much, and I really had a great time talking to all of the different people.
Yeah, it's been really good and so varied between episodes. I mean, there's 2 episodes in particular that I think were somewhat similar. We were talking to 2, senior people, but everything else, I mean, I think they were all so different and very varied, and that's what's fun about science. It's so broad. But yeah, so in episode 1, Elizabeth and I, we both welcomed you guys as listeners to Keep It Science, gave you a taste of what everything was about.
Yeah, so that was for episode 1, such a long time ago. And then we had episode 2, where we actually had Tim as a guest, and he was joined by Giselle Morbion. And we talked about keep it stress-free. So we talked about valuable insights into how to reduce stress. And it was really interesting because it was combined with the scientific knowledge and a lot of practical tips that Tim brought to the table, especially when we spoke about nutrition. So Tim, maybe share with us, how was your first podcast experience with us?
It was amazing. And it was really exciting to be your first guest in earnest, I suppose, as well, alongside Giselle. What was really quite different for me is I've done a lot of public speaking over the many years of my career, but this was my very first time talking to an audience and not being able to see them as well. So that's quite a different experience for somebody on a podcast, and something that takes a little getting used to, because obviously if you're a public speaker, you enjoy that positive feedback that you gain from looking at your audience, and hopefully they're not nodding off. But they're nodding in agreement as to what you're saying, hopefully, rather than nodding off. So you don't get that from a podcast. So it was a different experience, but I really enjoyed it. And you certainly go into a podcast feeling like, I know what I'm talking about. This is the path we're going to take on this particular episode. But you do take little tangents as well. And you play off your fellow guest to a degree as well. So Giselle brought a different aspect to the whole thing to myself as a nutritionist. So she was more on the breath work and mindful techniques, etc. Keeping, she's also into cold water swimming, which I'm not so sure that is something I want to take up. After listening to people talk about that, I believe it's very good for stress, but maybe not for me. And it was also really interesting, some of the questions you asked me, Elizabeth, were about how I coped with stressful situations in the workplace as well, and how I organized myself to mitigate those stresses that the scientist does experience every day in the workplace. So it was really good fun. Hopefully there's some real gems in there for people to listen to and follow and help them cope with stress in their lives, because it's unfortunately is a part of our everyday lives, but it's not necessarily something that we're particularly good at coping with. And if we can cope with it and you learn how to mitigate those stresses, then we can certainly sail through life.
Yes, and I think that episode we definitely budgeted well for time, but there was so much really interesting stuff that we had to do an extra video with Giselle to go through some of the breathing techniques, and that was really good. And I know how you said, Tim, that you didn't want to send people in your audience to sleep, but part of Giselle's some of her exercises, I think they very much helped, and a podcast on keeping things stress-free may well send people to sleep, and that's okay.
Yes, I think, the reason we had to do the video afterwards as well is some of the exercises were absolutely fantastic, but you had a lot of empty time as well, because she'd have you looking at a wall and and moving your head to one side to the other, but you weren't actually speaking during that time, so it would have sounded like we'd gone off air. So I think doing the video was much better than including it in the episode. And like you say, we had so much material. It was great to have the opportunity to do some shorts afterwards.
Yeah, and it's one thing that we've really enjoyed adding in to all of our episodes, having these little shorts so that people can, not if they don't have enough time necessarily to sit down and listen to the full episode, they can get a key bit of information, they can do one of these exercises, they can download these things and have them at later dates. But yes, that was an episode that I found really fun to listen to.
Relaxing.
Yeah.
Stress-free.
Absolutely. And I think what's been really interesting is the feedback we've had as well, and the people and the places that we're getting feedback from. So it's resonating with people, obviously. I've had some messages via my LinkedIn site from as far away, Canada, Australia, etc., saying, listen to the podcast and it's absolutely fantastic. And so it's really exciting to hear that.
Absolutely.
And then obviously you two moved forwards into the next episode.
Yes, keep it fun with Raul and Fernando. That was super fun, as it said on the tin. Raul and Fernando, both absolute pioneers in the way that they use social media to make research engaging and entertaining for audiences. I think ensuring that you keep your science fun as well as dead informative helps to sort of break down these concepts that are really complex so that everybody can understand. They put them in a way that a layman in the area can really understand. Anybody that's scientifically interested but not necessarily a PhD in Fernando's topic, for example, bananas, he breaks it down in a way that is so fun. And we can actually show you a very short snippet of that episode now.
But the thing is, you have to be happy at your work. You have to keep it fun, as you said, and as long as you're a good researcher. So in my case, I keep publishing papers. I do serious research, and when I have to be serious, because in some countries you have to. But when you are not in those environments, just explore the creativity.
Dad, you can say, I've always hated bananas, and it was very difficult to get me to eat bananas, but you can't hate Fernando, and he adds just so much color and brightness to everything that he does.
I recently bought you a smoothie maker, didn't I? And introduced you to bananas in smoothie as a way of getting them into you.
Yes.
Quite a useful
That's cheating.
It's cheating, but it works. He's finally eaten bananas, Elizabeth.
Yes. I do like banana loaf. I don't know what it is. I can't stand bananas. But yeah, it's probably a texture thing. But yes, so, Fernando is so synonymous now with bananas that he's amassed this big old following, and he's sent banana-related items from all over the world.
Which I love. It's great. I mean, all over his social media, everything is yellow. His recent addition is yellow lab gloves. I mean, yes. It's great, right? Dream come true. Everything in yellow.
Absolutely.
But I think it's not just Fernando. I think it's also Raul who just gets sent things all the time, but it's more like academia memes from all over the place, and everyone kind of presenting a reviewer too, and sometimes even their PI, which is understanding. But I think also what I really liked about that episode is obviously it was talking about how we communicate science in a fun way and use social media, which I found really interesting. But I think also one part of the conversation was the challenges and how both Raul and Fernando had tried different things initially, like, get a social media following, get attention to their work. And I think it was a lot about, for example, I think Raoul used a lot of photography, and it wasn't really getting the traction. It was only once they introduced humor and something that is relatable to a broader audience that they really started to get traction. And what I really took away from that is A, it's okay to fail because we all do sometimes. Yeah. And B, the most important thing is to kind of recognize when that happens. And, if you want to, you can step away and try something else. And that's fine too. And I really like that take-home message.
Absolutely. I think it's really valuable. I've said it many times that people need to publish their failures and celebrate them more, because then it stops someone from making the exact same failure in the future. But that's a whole other topic of people publishing these things in journals, because all we do in journals is celebrate victories and stuff. And you can have a bit of fun with things like this. An example that I can think of, I made the worst potential sample ever for SEM a long time ago, and it looked awful. But I used ImageJ and turned it into a piece of pop art that I proudly show on my mantelpiece. Because the colors, everything looked fun, it looked creative. It doesn't matter that the images themselves were rubbish, because I've turned them into something that I can enjoy. And so, celebrate your failures.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the failures in the scientific community actually turned out to be some of the greatest inventions. When I was a small child, about 5 doors down from where we lived was a guy called Sir William Cocker, and he was the guy that invented Dettol, and it was a complete accident. He had no intention of inventing what he came up with. Whatever they were looking at didn't work. It was a failure. And that's what came out of it. And some of those great experiences have come out of failure, haven't they? So
yeah, I suppose you can't talk about failures that turned out well without talking about penicillin as well.
Absolutely.
Probably the most famous one, I guess.
Yes, definitely. And now we want to talk with you about episode 4 and 5, because after this amazing third episode talking about fun, we moved to a more serious topic, namely leadership in biotech. And so we started off with Keep It Visionary with Dr. Adam Glan from Unicorn Biotechnologies. And then we had Keep It Technology with Dr. Malte Wachsmuth from Bruker Luxendo. They're obviously two industry leaders, and they laid out really a lot of entrepreneurial wisdom in the sci-tech areas. And it was so exciting to listen to them, not only about their career and, the decisions that they made, but really also about their business strategies and how they personally, approached their work in terms of their science that they moved around, and how they aligned their team and how they really have conversations and communications with the team, because I think that's what it really comes down to. But it was definitely so full of amazing insights. And now we have a very short snippet from Dr. Malte Wachsmuth.
On the one hand, we really try to keep track of what's going on in science to understand, as you say, new samples, new ways to mount your samples, new methods to prepare samples. Clearing is probably a prime example, or expansion microscopy is another example where new ways to prepare samples really put new challenges on also the microscope and the imaging system. That's something we have to respond to.
Both Malte and Adam full of amazing insights. For me, it was really inspiring to hear about the challenges and the triumphs of, as we're both startup companies ourselves, hearing about these challenges in startup companies in biotech, and it was great to learn a little more about these cutting edge technologies as well, and how they're shaping the future of science and the scientists of the future. So it was great to hear these two episodes. And like I said earlier, they're somewhat similar topics, but they gave incredibly different conversations.
Absolutely. And I think it was also interesting if you compare them in hindsight a little bit more, because it was two very different career stages.
Yeah.
And I think if someone is just starting a company, especially like in the biotech sector, I think then it is very valuable to see, where company starts, how it progresses, and then how it ultimately can be sold off. And I think, following that projection is really interesting and insightful. So I've definitely learned a lot about like the behind the scenes of, biotech and pharma and big tech companies.
Yeah.
And we had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Tullio Rossi from Animate Your Science. And he gave us expert insights into optimizing workflows and strategizing for how to organize a project and be really efficient. And I think, no one has time for things. So being efficient and having good project management is really important for everyone, especially in this really fast-paced world where everyone is meant to do everything at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so I really loved to hear, how he organizes his project, how he works with automation, how he communicates with the team, but also, again, get some insights into, how he's built his company from the early stages, because he's now I think 8 or 9 people agency, which is really interesting, again, in science communication. But again, I think he also, added obviously that in addition to his scientific career, he took a lot of business classes, and he's still, trying to have a lot of continuous professional development and advance himself and invest into learning. And I think that really combines, or all of us scientists had in common. Everyone we spoke to were they have a really weird hobby, or they're really interested into a specific topic, because all of us are really driven by curiosity. So I absolutely love that. But that was also the episode that we started to have more conversations about AI, especially how we can use AI to, streamline our own thoughts, how we can use it in a project management way, which I think is starting to emerge now, because at the start it was ChatGPT just generating really simple ideas and thoughts, but now it's more about streamlining and improving project management and conversation. So I think this is really interesting, as we, especially now wanting to start in season 2, start to really get a little bit more into technology side of things.
Absolutely, yeah. And Tullio is the one that's put us onto Notion as well for organization. I know I've been looking into ways to make things easier, because obviously if you take on all of these projects yourself, you're bound to fail at some of them. And if you've got a AI personal assistant to help with all of these things, then it's really helpful. Tullio's episode was also the episode that had potentially one of my favorite facts in the series about shrimp.
Think about when you were out in the water and you find yourself near a reef. Have you ever noticed a crackling sound in the background? Majority of my life, I had no clue what made that sound, and I thought it was pebbles being moved back and forth by the waves, but not that. That is the sound produced by snapping shrimp. Snapping shrimp are small. They can be, the size of a small coin or up to the size of your index finger maximum. They're extremely common. They live in pretty much all environments, temperate, tropical, and they hide all the time. So they're there, but you never see them. They're always hiding, a bit like ants, right? But they're always there and in great numbers. And the way they communicate is by snapping their claw and making this clicking sound. Not only that, they also use it for hunting, because it turns out that their claw is just a marvel of evolution. It has a plunger and a socket. And when the plunger enters the socket, the water that was in there is shot out at such a speed that it produces a cavitation bubble that, when it implodes on itself, creates this super loud noise, which is second only to the sonar of a sperm whale.
Which also brings me to my favorite fact of the whole podcast, which was actually in the next episode 7, where we actually learned about thunder fever. So maybe Tim want to share with us the facts about thunder fever, as well as how you found it hosting an episode for us.
Yeah, again, really exciting to be offered the chance to be the host of an episode, something I'd never done before. It came about because I had a couple of old contacts that we've been friends for several years. So those two real experts on the hay fever side of things, and really is a very personal thing for me, because I've struggled with hay fever most of my life and learned ways to cope with mitigating hay fever. So it seemed a really nice opportunity to get 3 of us in the same place to have a chat about one of my favorite subjects, hay fever. And out of that came this wonderful fact from Max about thunder fever. And I've always noticed that after a storm, my hay fever was much, much worse. And you think, well, why is it worse? Because it's been rainy. You'd think it would make things easier, bringing all the pollens away and soaking them all away. But the fact that if it's a thunderstorm, thunder actually splits the pollen atom apart, and you get much smaller particles. Those smaller particles are able to go further into the lung tissue and therefore exacerbate the symptoms that people struggle with. So
Keep It Allergy Free Part 2 coming in Season 2.
well, you never know. I mean, it started off as Keep It Allergy Free, but I suppose we really veered down that hay fever route because we were coming into hay fever season, and because of the way the weather had been, I think it was predicted there was going to be quite a bad hay fever season this season. So it was a good timing, I think, to launch the episode of that part of the year.
And we've had loads of thunderstorms this summer so far.
Yes, so the thunder fever fact would be even more interesting for people,
Yes.
hopefully.
Wonderful. Before we move on, we will have a very quick word from one of our sponsors.
Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world. They make the sound by vigorously rubbing their penis on their abdomen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Then at night, they come out and crawl around your face and mate with each other.
Oh.
But
Sorry,
get this.
I would like to sleep tonight. As naturalists, let's face it, we find something dead, we go and we poke it with a stick. I did that with the deer like 3 weeks ago.
As you do. Rachel, no. You weren't paying attention. Blood and mucus.
Oh, right, sorry.
All right, this episode is going off the rails.
This is the quality
absolutely.
content people come here for. Strange by Nature podcast was chosen as one of the best science podcasts of 2021. Come join the fun wherever you find your podcasts.
All of the episodes are my favourite, but the next podcast in the series, Keep It Open, was one of my personal favourites, I think, speaking to Dr. Heidi Siebold and Dr. Natalie Whitehead about the transformative power of the growing movement, let's say, relatively growing movement of open science within research, education and beyond. Public engagement is obviously so important, and the mixture of that with the element of data reproducibility, it was a pretty dream topic for us to have on the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the main thing that I took away was the discussion not only about why negative data is so important, but also like the thought of who do data really belong to? Like, because obviously there's also public research money involved, etc. And I thought that was a really interesting discussion just to, reconsider who is involved in research and who do data belong to and how to handle data. And obviously Heidi is based in Germany and Natalie and we are based in the UK. So I think there was also this really interesting aspect of obviously international research and kind of regulations and post-Brexit. There was a lot of kind of interesting considerations to be had.
Yes, and it was really nice as well. I mean, we weren't expecting it. It was very nice at the end that Heidi and Natalie both said, they're going to follow each other on Twitter and stuff and get involved with each other's stuff. So, we've added, with our episode, we've managed to add to further openness in science.
Absolutely. And I think there was also one main thing of this, or common theme of this whole podcast, that all our guests kind of cross-connected and said we are really good connectors and bringing people together. And I think it's just highlighting that even though all of us have very different careers, we have a lot of interest in common. And so just bringing people together is something that we both really enjoy.
I think that's true, because I mean, at the start of the podcast, we talked about our complementary experience, but the guests that we paired together, they've always been complementary. Like yourself, Tim, and Giselle, you had very complementary experiences to talk about. So you were able to talk about the nutrition stuff. She was able to talk about the more psychological impacts of stress. And yeah, so keeping that between our guests, we didn't ever really want debates about things. We didn't, there isn't too much to disagree on in some of these things, but the working together to put great knowledge out there, I think is something that, episodes like this have done really well.
Yeah, I think it's always really nice to learn from somebody that has maybe a different angle to bring to a particular topic as well. And, certainly in the case of Giselle, we've maintained our contact sense as well. And I think that's what's so nice about this, is bringing people together as well, hopefully.
Yeah. And I suppose that brings us quite nicely to episode 9, our latest episode before this one.
Absolutely. So in our 9th episode, which was called Keep It Accessible, we spoke to Darren Edwards, who is a disabled explorer and international keynote speaker.
The ability to walk seems to be perceived as the main thing, whereas, for a lot of people, actually, it's the stuff that you don't see that represents the biggest challenge. So for me, walking, I've adapted to not do, and I live a really fulfilling, happy, purposeful, adventurous life without the ability to walk. What has been the most frustrating has been, me and TJ, my wife, have been sort of, on an IVF and baby journey for the last 2.5 years. And it's actually the ability to not have a baby naturally, and hence why we have to use IVF, that can be the most frustrating.
I have no words for elements of this episode. It tugged at heartstrings. It was definitely one of the most inspiring conversations we'd had at that point. I mean, long may it continue. Season 2 guests have got a lot to live up to, because Darren, with every single word, it was incredible. I was actually reading his book again this morning, and towards the start there was a quote that it summarized the podcast as well, where his head was at throughout the start of this journey that he's gone on. He said, 3 words clung desperately to the frayed edges of my consciousness as I came close to blacking out. Please don't die. Life hung in the balance. And it's just like, I mean, this for me was potentially one of the least scientific topics we'd covered. I talk to you quite often, Ellie, whilst we're doing the podcasts, and I was sort of like, should we try and move things onto different sciences? But yes, I mean, it was truly just one of those podcasts that you couldn't change topic. You didn't want to. You wanted to stay part of it and talk about some of these amazing things that he's done since.
And yeah, I think interviewing Darren, it was just such an honor, and I could have spoken with him for hours and hours on end. If you haven't done, please listen to that episode, and also read his book, which is called Strength Through Adversity. It is really a life-changing book, and for me personally, this episode was really close to my heart, obviously, because it was great to interview Darren, who I know as a spinal cord injury sufferer, and share with him my experience as a rare autoimmune disease sufferer. And they sound very different in terms of illnesses, but there's so much common overlap. And again, like you said, reading his book is absolutely amazing. And when you read, how he goes through his time in hospital and what the importance of mindset is, it's just so striking. And I just spoke today, this morning, actually, with someone, and we spoke about the importance of gratitude and positivity, because especially, it doesn't matter what kind of life setback you have. If you have a negative mindset and no gratitude, it's so easy to fall into depression and suffer from depression. And often it is, this change in mindset that really makes this difference. And we also spoke with Darren about the importance of mindset, especially during physiotherapy and rehab. But I think, again, sharing with him and kind of talking with him about all these experiences was just truly an absolute honor and privilege.
Yeah, I think it wasn't really a fear for the episode, but it was that it was going to be too far away to be able to call it Keep It Science. But I mean, in it, we covered the mechanics of disability, the psychology behind it, things like that. And yeah.
Truly inspiring chap as well, just to listen to his story. And I think we can really put a lot of those aspects of the things he's learned about himself into our lives as scientists. Keeping a positive mindset is really important when you're in the sciences, because you will get setbacks and knockbacks. Yeah. So there are aspects that can certainly be applied to everyday scientific research and life.
Absolutely. And I think we also ended the episode really nicely with Darren's call to action from scientists to research spinal cord injury, to talk about, nerve recovery, to look into research grants, etc. And it was great because we also spoke about Wings for Life, which is also kind of bringing together an international spinal cord injury kind of community. And so I think we kind of started off with science. We spoke a little bit in between, and then we ended with science, but it was mainly a very personal chat, really, and really inspiring.
Yes, and we did keep it science. So we did what we promised to do. Yeah, and I guess that brings us nicely to where we are today, 10 months on, and putting the final seal on season 1.
Again, it's been an absolutely great ride, talking to so many people and having listeners across so many different countries. It's been absolutely amazing. We've been speaking to a lot of innovators. We have especially made a lot of newfound friends. As Tim said, we're still in contact with most of the people on a regular basis, and we try and reach out to them and talk to them and see what they're doing, and obviously also grow their networks and cross-connect people as much as we can. And we have spoken with companies, scientific pioneers, as well as keynote speakers who are absolutely inspirational. So it's been really a wild ride, but a huge pleasure to do that.
Yes, and at the time of recording, we've now got around 500 subscribers from over 20 countries. So we have officially gone global.
But yes, I think, again, going back to kind of the start of the episode, I also wanted to thank everyone again. Not just our listeners and our guests, but also huge thanks to Nick and Tim for making this happen and always being so patient and bringing so much knowledge and really interesting conversations to the table.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yes, we'd also like to thank all of the guests, their employers, if they've needed to sign off on some of these things, all of our sponsors, the podcasts that we've featured adverts for in the middle and end of our podcasts. We've absolutely loved what we've done in season 1, and we're so glad that it's been so well received.
Absolutely. So we're in for more for season 2.
Yes. So guys, if season 1 was a toolkit, what are we going to do in season 2? Season 1 covered a lot of soft skills, from entrepreneurial business mindsets to how to keep science engagement fun. In season 2, are we aiming for a bit more of a technological focus? So we've talked about some of the episodes that we could have on biotechnology, AI. We're also starting to partner with companies for sponsorships. So if you have a technology that you wish to see showcased, please get in touch with us.
And now to all our listeners, as always, you can email us at keepitscience@gmail.com if you have any suggestions for topics, or if you want to join us as a sponsor for season 2. Thanks for listening.
And see you all in season 2.
Yay!
Cannot wait for season 2. For season 2, we still have some availability for sponsorship. We've hopefully shown how impactful podcasting is and how it can showcase your company as an industry leader. Send us an email at keepitscience@gmail.com with sponsorship in the subject and organise a chat with Elizabeth and myself. Thanks for listening.
So, have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you could build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really, really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called, Well, That's Interesting, and it's a comedy science-y show that tells the story behind the facts because those stories are funny. Every Thursday, I tell the tale behind an odd new discovery, like how researchers found 2 mysterious structures surrounding Earth's core, or how it's actually possible to stop hiccups using a rectal massage. Yes, there's a story behind that. No pun intended. And I tell the story because storytelling is the perfect way to learn and remember. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful. So, join the flock and listen to Well, That's Interesting wherever you do podcasts.